If you are anything like me, you have probably been in more relationships that you wish you hadn't than ones that you are grateful you were. It's not just the time, it's the emotional stress, the money, the compromises, the excuses you made that you look back on later and think, how did I not see this coming? And then there are the others, the ones that felt almost effortless, like being best friends who were also deeply attracted to each other. You could talk about anything. There was compassion and passion, mutual respect, trust. So what was the difference? Why do some relationships last, allow you to grow into more of who you want to be, and others cut you off at the knees and leave you bleeding? The difference isn't luck, and it isn't chemistry. It's what we fail to notice in the beginning. It's what we overlook while we're caught up in the feeling. Because the small signals you ignore early become the realities you live with later. And when you learn to pay attention in real time, you gain foresight. You see the person, you see the pattern, you see the compatibility as it unfolds. And that clarity tells you what you're actually committing to and whether you truly want it. Most relationships don't fall apart where people think that they do. They don't break down because of one big moment or one big mistake. The cracks start forming much earlier, when the foundation was supposed to be laid but wasn't. If relationships have ever felt confusing, draining, or harder than they should be, this isn't because you're bad at relationships. It's because you were taught to follow attraction, intensity, and hope, instead of seeing who someone really is before you attach, invest, or commit. When it comes to your happiness, being honest with yourself early saves a lot of cleanup later. So let's slow this down and look at the foundational truths of a healthy relationship most people never learn, but wish that they had. Number 1, relationships are hard because you are not the only variable. Relationships are complicated because you're not dealing with just yourself. There's another person involved with their own history, habits, wounds, values, and limits, which means you're not just choosing a person, you're choosing everything that comes with them. How they handle stress, how they argue, how they apologize, how they don't apologize. All of it shows up eventually. Relationships feel personal because they are. You care, you invest, you want things to work. But that emotional investment can make it harder to see what's actually happening. When you want connection, your mind naturally fills in gaps with hope, explanations, or excuses. This is where people say things like, they're just stressed, or they didn't mean it like that, or once things calm down, it'll be different. That's not dishonesty. That's hope trying to do the job of information. Someone else's reactions, growth, or lack of effort are nothing that you can fix for them or make them change. When you accept this early, you stop trying to see them as you want them to be and start seeing them for who they really are. This is where many people get stuck. They focus on what they feel instead of what's actually happening, and that creates a relationship based on fantasy, not reality, which can't last. Fantasy feels good at first. Reality is what you have to live inside of, and those two don't age the same way. Understanding this isn't discouraging. It centers you and brings you perspective. It reminds you that awareness matters more than intensity. And once you understand that, the focus naturally shifts to the only part of any relationship you actually have control over. Number 2, you can only control your side. In any relationship, the only part you can control is your side, your choices, your boundaries, your responses, and your willingness to be honest with yourself. That's not because the other person doesn't matter. It's because you don't get to decide how other people think, feel, or behave. Understanding this early saves you from a lot of confusion and unnecessary pain. It also saves you from spending years trying to manage someone else's emotions like it's your responsibility. It isn't, and it never was. Focusing on your side doesn't mean being cold or detached. It means staying oriented to what you can actually influence. When you know where your responsibility ends, you stop trying to manage the relationship by shrinking, changing yourself, or staying quiet just to keep the peace or avoid losing someone. When people don't understand this, relationships often turn into power struggles. Not always loud ones, usually subtle ones. Pressure, guilt, feeling like you have to over-explain yourself to make the other person comfortable. If you ever find yourself rehearsing conversations in your head just to avoid someone's reaction, that's information. That's not communication. That's self-protection. If your words or actions get used against you later, that isn't closeness. That's control, and it creates tension, not safety. A stable relationship is one where you don't feel like you have to become less of yourself to stay in it. You shouldn't have to edit your personality, soften your truth, or shrink your needs just to keep someone comfortable. Comfort that costs you yourself isn't safety. Self-respect shows up in your ability to look at the relationship honestly and ask, do I feel safe here? Am I still myself? Am I allowed to have my own friends, thoughts, and opinions? Or do I watch my words, feel anxious about reactions, or stay quiet when I should speak up? Healthy relationships allow you to grow. They don't require you to disappear, perform, or shrink just to be accepted. And one of the clearest ways to tell whether a relationship supports growth or slowly breaks it down is by paying attention to patterns. Number 3, red flags are patterns, not moments. A red flag isn't a bad day, a mistake, or an awkward moment. It's part of a pattern, something that shows up again and again in how someone communicates, handles stress, treats others, or takes responsibility. Your body often notices patterns before your mind wants to accept them. Discomfort, tension, or hesitation aren't signs that you're overthinking, they're information. Awareness isn't judgment, it's data. Your nervous system is simply reacting to what keeps happening, even when you're still trying to give the benefit of the doubt. That tight feeling in your chest, the hesitation before responding, the way your energy drops after certain interactions, that's not weakness, that's pattern recognition. Patterns don't normally announce themselves loudly. They show up quietly, in how someone talks about other people when they're frustrated, in how often they cross lines and then apologize, in apologies that sound sincere but are followed by the same behavior. Each moment on its own may not seem that bad, which is why people often minimize what they're noticing. This is how people stay stuck, not because something is awful every time, but because it's just uncomfortable enough to notice and just subtle enough to dismiss. You might notice that after someone blows up, they apologize, but it keeps happening. Or that they're kind one-on-one, but harsh or dismissive toward others when they feel stressed. Or that you feel pressured to explain yourself repeatedly, even when you didn't do anything wrong. These aren't isolated moments. They're parts of a pattern. Patterns of behavior are the foundation of every relationship. They either support it or slowly break it down. Paying attention early doesn't make you judgmental. It makes you informed. Ignoring negative patterns doesn't make them disappear. It just increases the time you spend living with them. The earlier you notice patterns, the less damage they cause. Not because you're trying to point them out so that the other person will change to keep you, but because you're staying honest with yourself about what you are willing to allow in your life. What you allow shapes how you feel about yourself, and that is self-respect in real time. Respecting yourself also means being honest about something many people try to avoid. Number 4, you cannot change people. One of the most painful misunderstandings in relationships is the belief that love will change someone. People change when they see a reason to change, not because they're loved harder, explained to better, or waited on longer. And that reason has to come from them, not from your patience, your pain, or your willingness to wait it out. When you build a relationship around who you hope someone becomes, you end up frustrated with who they already are. That doesn't make you wrong or naive. It just means you have replaced reality with hope. Waiting for someone to change can quietly change you. You become more flexible, more understanding, more tired, while the situation stays exactly the same. That's the trade people don't realize that they're making. You keep adjusting, hoping, or explaining, believing that if you say the right things or love them enough, things will improve. but change that comes from being told to change never lasts. Clarity means accepting what is true now, not what could be true later. Choosing based on reality doesn't make you pessimistic. It makes you free from wasting time and effort spent on something you had no control over to begin with. Relationships only work when you accept what's real instead of negotiating with potential. And this is where a lot of people get confused about what actually holds a relationship together. Before we stop here, I want to ground this for a moment. None of what you just heard is about becoming guarded, suspicious, or closed off. It's about becoming clear. Most relationship pain doesn't come from being too caring or too hopeful. It comes from not understanding what you're actually dealing with and staying longer than clarity would suggest. When you understand that you're not the only variable, that you can only control your side, that patterns matter more than moments, and that you can't change people, something important shifts. You stop personalizing what was never personal. You stop negotiating with potential. And you stop confusing effort with effectiveness. This is what adulting in relationships actually looks like at the foundation level. Not cynicism, not walls, awareness. And awareness doesn't tell you what to choose. It just makes sure that you're choosing with your eyes open. In the description below, you'll find a companion PDF with simple questions to help you notice how these patterns show up in real life, along with a written version of this video that you can read, follow along with, or return to later.